Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
You never paid rent, my dad said, not angry, worse, mocking. He was up on the ladder trying to fix a loose gutter that he wouldn't have touched if I hadn't pushed him about it for weeks. I stood there, hands gripping the cold aluminum, making sure the whole damn thing didn't tip and send him into the rhododendrons. I remember I hadn't even said anything. I was just standing there, quiet, like I always was, trying to be helpful, when he looked down at me with that smirk. That same smirk he wore when he told people I worked with computers, or something as if I was some kind of overpaid idiot playing video games for a living. You never paid rent. It came out casual, but it sliced. I didn't respond. I think I blinked. My grip tightened on the ladder, and I looked away toward the cracked driveway I'd resealed last spring. Paid out of my own pocket. Like the new HVAC, like the water heater, like the freaking roof that had collapsed in the back corner of the attic during a February freeze 6 years ago, all paid for by me. And all without a damn word of thanks. I had moved back in after college, just for a year. That was the plan. I had a job offer out of state, in Denver, but Mom cried when I told her I might take it. Dad said nothing, just handed me a stack of bills and said, "Be a man about it." They were behind on property taxes. Mom had been using store credit cards to buy groceries. The house was one missed payment away from getting swallowed by the bank. So I stayed. I got the job closer to home, paid less, longer commute, but I stayed. I consolidated their debt under my name, took over the mortgage legally to avoid the IRS disaster brewing behind closed doors. Funny thing is, when I suggested putting the house in my name, neither of them even paused to ask why. I had a lawyer draw it up. Mom just signed. Dad didn't even read it. He never did. That was 15 years ago. 15 years of me paying every single goddamn month, never missing once. I paid for the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance. I kept the lights on, kept food in the fridge, kept the place standing. And every time they introduced me to someone new, it was always, "Jason still lives at home." Can you believe that? Like I was some 42-year-old failure who never learned to grow up, when the truth was, I was the only reason their lives didn't collapse in on themselves like a sinkhole. They never asked how the mortgage got paid. They never noticed the water bill stopped coming in their name. They just assumed the world worked out for them, like it always did, because they were the kind of people who believed bad luck was something that happened to other people. I don't know why that day with the ladder broke me. It wasn't the worst thing he'd ever said. Not by a mile. Maybe it was the way he said it, not just mocking, but confident, smug, like he truly believed it. Like I'd been freeloading. Like I'd been lucky to be tolerated under his roof. And I looked up at him, my 66-year-old father in cargo shorts and a stained Marine Corps t-shirt, and I saw a man who had never once in his life admitted he needed help. He wobbled a little on the ladder, and I studied it without a word, teeth clenched so tight my jaw ached. The thought came before I could stop it. If I let go, would he fall? Would it change anything? Of course, I didn't let go. I held it steady like I always do. I held the damn thing and said nothing. That night, after dinner, meatloaf I had paid for, cooked by Mom, but still somehow counted as her contribution to the world, I sat in my room, which used to be the guest room before I gave mine up when my cousin came to live with us for a year in 2010. Another sacrifice. Another thing I'd never get credit for. I opened my banking app to check my balance, a habit from the years when I was stretching my paycheck across bills that weren't even mine, and there it was. Another mortgage payment, cleared. On time. Every month like clockwork. $2,200. Gone. And for the first time in years, I just stared at the transaction. Not with pride. Not with that quiet sense of duty that used to carry me through. I stared at it with disgust. Why the hell was I still paying it? Not just financially, emotionally. Why was I still footing the bill for people who saw me as a loser? Why was I killing myself to protect people who, if I disappeared tomorrow, would probably say I ran off because I couldn't handle adulthood? I had given up relationships for this. Rachel, The only woman who ever stuck around long enough to meet my parents had left because she said she couldn't be with someone who still lived under their thumb. She didn't understand that it wasn't that simple. But maybe it was. Maybe I just didn't want to admit it back then. Because what kind of grown man lets his life be hijacked out of guilt and obligation? What kind of man pays for a house he gets insulted in? I closed the app, went downstairs, and saw my dad sitting in his recliner, watching a rerun of some show where a kid yells at his parents for never understanding him. Dad chuckled and said, "Damn kids. No respect anymore." And I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile you get when you finally see the edge of the cliff you've been walking toward your whole life. It was the kind of smile that meant something was about to change. And for once, it wasn't going to be me. It had rained for 4 days straight the week the roof started leaking again, and of course, nobody noticed until water was dripping directly onto the old family photos hanging in the upstairs hallway. The ones no one cared about until they were in danger of being ruined. I remember standing there, catching the drops in a mixing bowl, thinking how ridiculous it was that no one else seemed to hear the plop 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 echoing through the house like some slow, steady metronome counting down to a final decision. I canceled a weekend trip to Asheville I had planned for months, a trip that was supposed to be a rare break for me, a reset, and instead I climbed onto the roof that Saturday morning with a roll of sealant tape, a bucket of tar, and more frustration in my chest than I knew what to do with. I didn't complain. I didn't mention the money. I didn't bring up the fact that it was my third time fixing that same goddamn patch in 5 years because Dad refused to call a real contractor. I just did the job. Quiet, efficient, dependable, same as always. Later that day, while I was hauling the old gutter sections to the curb, sweating through a shirt I hadn't even wanted to wear, Walter came out to supervise like he always did. Not to help. Just to stand there with his arms crossed and give advice no one asked for. "You always act like you're doing us some big favor," he said, not even looking me in the eye, just sort of tossing the words into the air like they'd land wherever they wanted. "You don't even pay rent." It wasn't the first time he said something like that, but this time it didn't hit me the same way. This time it didn't sting. It didn't even shock me. It just sounded tired, stupid, hollow. And it made me laugh, not a belly laugh, not a nervous laugh, just a quiet, breathy exhale through the nose. A laugh that said more than yelling ever could. "Is that so?" I said, and that was it. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a fight. I just picked up the last piece of bent gutter, tossed it in the pile, and walked back inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anger. That would have been easier. It was something colder, heavier, like I had finally seen the exact shape of the hole I'd been filling all these years, and I realized it didn't matter how much I poured into it. It wasn't a hole. It was a bottomless pit. And I was done pretending it could ever be filled. I got up before sunrise the next morning, made coffee, sat down at my laptop, and logged into the bank. It was muscle memory by now, clicking through the tabs, checking the balance, scanning the transaction history. The mortgage payment had cleared again 2 days earlier, $2,200, gone just like always. A perfectly timed sacrifice to the altar of ungrateful parents. I clicked on the autopay tab and hovered my mouse over the option to cancel. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with your toes just barely curled over the drop, the kind of decision that felt small in execution but massive in meaning. I clicked. Just like that, the payments were done. Cold, clean, permanent. I figured, worst case, they'd get a 90-day warning before foreclosure. That's almost like 6 months, right? Long enough for them to figure it out, to maybe sell some stuff, or hell, even ask me for help for once instead of assuming I'd always just handle it. Of course, I knew the notices would come addressed to me. Legally, the house was mine. But I also knew they wouldn't see that part at first. They'd see the envelope and assume it was junk mail or some new scam. It might take weeks before the reality actually sank in. I didn't say anything to them. I still fixed the loose kitchen cabinet door on Tuesday. I still picked up groceries on Thursday. I still sat through dinner with them on Sunday night, listening to my mom talk about her book club and my dad mutter about the neighbor's uncut lawn. Nothing had changed yet, not on the surface. But underneath? Everything was shifting. The strange thing was, I didn't feel guilty. Not a bit. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I had been carrying this enormous sack of invisible weight, and suddenly someone had cut it loose behind me. I could breathe. I could see clearly. Later that week, I ran into Uncle Donnie at the grocery store, in the aisle with the canned soup. He looked at me like he knew something, like maybe he'd already heard the first whispers from Walter or Karen, I don't know. Maybe Dad had started to notice a change in the mail. Donnie leaned in a little, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "About damn time, kid." That's all he said. Then he picked up a can of chili and walked off like it was just another Saturday. But in that one sentence, I felt something click into place, like a lock finally turning open after years of trying the wrong key. He knew. Hell, he probably knew more than he let on. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't alone. It was a Tuesday morning that started off like any other, one of those bland, overcast days where the sky looks like a wet paper towel and everyone in the office moves just a little slower than usual, clutching their coffee cups like lifelines and waiting for lunch to come around so they could pretend to work a little less. I was halfway through debugging a nightmare of a code issue when I heard the sound of my name being called at the front desk, not paged, not buzzed on the intercom, just called, loud and raw, like someone had walked in and decided politeness was optional. I stood up and saw him through the glass partition, my father, Walter, red-faced and breathing like he'd just sprinted across the parking lot, though I knew damn well he'd parked illegally near the entrance like he always did, claiming that the rules didn't apply if you were just grabbing something. He was holding a yellow envelope in one hand, crumpled slightly like he'd been squeezing it the whole drive over. I stepped into the hallway before he could embarrass me further in front of my coworkers, though let's be honest, Walter embarrassing me had never stopped him before. He shoved the envelope into my chest without so much as a hello and barked, "You want to explain this?" loud enough to echo off the drywall. I didn't flinch. I looked down at the notice, already knowing exactly what it was before I even saw the bolded words at the top. Notice of default. The irony wasn't lost on me that it had taken them 35 days to figure it out. A full 5 weeks had passed since I canceled the automatic mortgage payment, and in that time neither Walter nor Karen had bothered to check the mail, question a missing receipt, or even glance at the growing pile of unopened letters stacked on the hallway table next to the ceramic bowl full of expired coupons and forgotten car keys. "What is this?" he asked again, voice rising now with that barely contained fury he used to scare me with as a kid, but just made him look small now. "Why is your name on this? Why are they saying we're in default?" I waited a beat. Let it hang there. Then I said it, slow and calm, like I was reading the side of a cereal box. "Because the house is in my name. Has been for over 10 years. He blinked. For a second, I thought he was going to hit me, his fists clenched, his jaw working overtime. Then the confusion crept in, soft and awful. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You signed it over," I said, still calm, still flat. "Back when you were months behind on taxes and about 2 weeks from losing it to the state. I had a lawyer draw up the papers. You and Mom both signed. Don't you remember?" He shook his head, but I could see it, the flicker of recollection behind the anger, the moment when denial started to collapse under the weight of the truth. He remembered. He just didn't want to admit it. You've been paying it all this time?" he asked, quieter now, like the walls were pressing in on him. "Every month." "Every damn month," I said, letting the cold creep into my voice now. "While you sat there acting like I was some parasite. While you cracked jokes about me living off you." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just a wheeze of air, like he'd been punched in the gut. I stepped past him, motioned for him to follow, and walked into the break room so we weren't putting on a show for the whole damn office. He followed, slow and stiff, and when I turned back around, I swear he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. "I paid for the repairs," I said. "The roof. The HVAC. The water heater. The taxes. Groceries. I kept that house alive. And not once did either of you say thank you. Not once did you ask how it all got covered. You just acted like it was magic, Like the universe owed you some damn favor, and I was just part of the furniture. Why didn't you say something? He whispered. Oh, you mean instead of letting you pretend you were the king of the castle while your son quietly bailed you out month after month? I laughed, a sharp, joyless sound. I did say something. You just weren't listening. Or maybe you just didn't want to hear it. He sat down heavily on one of the plastic chairs, the envelope still clutched in his hand like a life raft. I half expected him to start crying, but of course, he didn't. Walter didn't cry. He sulked. He fumed. He yelled. But tears? That was for weak men. An hour later, we were back at the house. Mom was in the kitchen, and when she saw the envelope in his hand, she dropped the spoon she was stirring with. She looked at me, her eyes already watery. Jason, what's going on? I told her everything. From the first payment to the canceled trip to Asheville to the click of that button on my laptop that ended the charade. Her hands shook. She tried to say she didn't know, that she thought everything was handled. That thing never meant to use me like that. But that's the thing about using people, it doesn't always look like exploitation. Sometimes it looks like silence. Like convenience. Like comfort built on someone else's back. She asked me why I was doing this. Why now? Why I couldn't just let things be. And I looked at both of them, eyes wide open, voice quiet but firm. I'll consider helping again, I said. But you're going to have to move out. You have 30 days. They stared at me like I'd just told them the house was on fire and I had the only hose. Dad opened his mouth to object, but I cut him off with one raised hand. No yelling, I said. No guilt. No games. 30 days. Or I let it go. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for their answer. I already knew it. The first thing my father tried was volume, as if yelling could rewind time or make the papers disappear from the kitchen table where I'd left a printed copy of the 30-day notice, just in case they wanted to pretend it was all a dream. He slammed the door, kicked over the umbrella stand, which had been there for 20 years, always in the way but never moved, and shouted something about lawyers and rights and how you don't evict your own blood. He paced the living room like a caged animal, his boots thudding on the hardwood floors I had refinished myself 2 summers ago when they complained about the old ones creaking too much at night. Mom cried, of course, clutching a dish towel like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth, asking softly but insistently, "Where will we go, Jason? What are we supposed to do now?" Her voice was trembling but practiced, like she'd been rehearsing it in the mirror before I got home. She kept darting glances toward my father, hoping I'd cave the way I always used to, that I'd see the big sad eyes and the wringing hands and forget every insult, every dismissal, every year I'd spent putting my life on hold to be their human safety net. But I didn't say a word. I stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold like it was a play I'd seen 100 times and finally knew all the lines to, except this time, I wasn't acting in it. I was in the audience. And frankly, I was getting tired of the performance. Over the next week, the calls started. First from the house phone, yes, they still had one of those, and then from Mom's cell, which she'd never used to text me before, but suddenly had plenty to say. Messages filled with long sighs, soft-spoken phrases like, "We didn't know," and "if we'd understood, we never would've," trailing off into static. Dad didn't call, not at first. He preferred silence when he was angry, the kind that hangs over a room like a damp sheet, heavy and uncomfortable. I ignored it all. I didn't block their numbers, that felt too final, but I didn't answer either. Every missed call felt like one more inch of distance between us, and for the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to close the gap. Then, one Thursday evening, as I was sitting in the small rented place across town, a studio apartment with thin walls and louder neighbors, but mine, entirely mine, I got a voicemail. I recognized his voice immediately, but it wasn't the version I was used to. It was cracked, brittle, like the wind had hollowed him out and left nothing but air and regret. I didn't know you were paying all that, Jason, he said, his breath hitching. I thought it just came out of nowhere. That it was just taken care of. I didn't know it was you. There was a long pause, then a sharp inhale, like he was trying to say something else but couldn't. The message ended without a goodbye. I listened to it twice. Not because I needed to, but because I didn't believe it was real the first time. Then I deleted it. Not because I was angry, not anymore, but because I knew if I kept it, I'd listen to it again. And again. And I didn't want to become the kind of man who needed to hear his father cry just to feel like he mattered. The truth is, they never asked where the money came from that saved their asses all those years ago. When the county posted the final notice on the door about unpaid taxes, they panicked for 2 days, fought for 3 more, and then one morning, like magic, it all went away. A check had appeared, the debt was cleared, and life moved on. They never questioned how a 28-year-old kid fresh out of a junior developer job suddenly had $37,000 to drop on back taxes and penalties. But I hadn't gotten it from work. I'd gotten it from Grandpa Henry, my mom's father, the only one in the family who ever really saw me, really talked to me like I was a person and not a walking favor machine. He left me a small inheritance when he passed, a modest lump sum tucked away in an old account that bypassed probate because he didn't trust my parents not to squander it on another deck renovation. His words, not mine. I never told them. I figured they'd find out eventually. They didn't. They never even thought to ask. So yeah, it was my money that saved the house. It was my name that went on the deed. It was my signature on every check, every repair, every replacement. And now, they were finally starting to realize what that meant, not just legally, but emotionally. They had built their comfort on top of my silence, and now that silence had turned into absence. And then came the next surprise. I was standing in line at the grocery store, picking up something simple for dinner, frozen lasagna, a bagged salad, maybe a bottle of wine I wouldn't finish, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, out of habit. Hey, Jason? It's Rachel. I froze. I hadn't heard her voice in over 3 years, not since she packed her things and walked out of the townhouse we were supposed to move into together. She left because I wouldn't leave the house. Wouldn't stop dropping everything for my parents. Wouldn't choose her. I heard about your parents, she said, soft but pointed. You okay? I couldn't find the words at first. I didn't even know how she knew. Maybe mutual friends. Maybe small towns talked louder than I remembered. But her voice, even over the hum of the checkout lane and the beep of barcodes, cut through like it had never left. I'm fine, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. I mean it, she said. If you need to talk. Or yell. Or just sit in a car and scream, you know. I'm around. I paid for my groceries and walked to the parking lot with her voice still ringing in my ear, wondering if this was a second chance, or just another echo from a life I'd let pass me by. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. But part of me, a quiet, stubborn part one hadn't heard in a long while, was curious. Curious about what came next. The house went up for sale on a Monday morning in late November, when the leaves had already fallen and the air had taken on that sharp, indifferent chill that seems to sneak into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I remember sitting in the drafty Airbnb I was renting on the other side of town, watching the online listing go live with photos that didn't feel real, wide-angle shots of rooms I had lived in for over half my life. Suddenly made sterile and bright with cheap staging furniture and lighting tricks that made the kitchen countertops look newer than they were. There was no trace of me in those pictures. No sign of the patched-up drywall in the hallway where my dad had once punched a hole during an argument about cable bills. No evidence of the worn spot on the floor near the front door where I used to drop my backpack every day after high school, long before I knew what it meant to carry real weight. The walls had been painted a fresh, inoffensive gray. The dining room table, the one my mom used to cry at during tax season, had been replaced by a fake farmhouse setup with a ceramic bowl full of plastic lemons. It looked like a house someone could love. But it wasn't mine anymore, not really. It hadn't been for a while. I hadn't planned to go back, not even to pick up my things. Most of my life could fit into the back of my car, and the rest I didn't want. But there were a couple boxes, old photo albums, some handwritten letters from Grandpa Henry, a box of records I never got around to digitizing that I figured I should grab before the new owners came to snoop around. I parked in the driveway a week before the final lockout date, the notice taped to the inside of the window already beginning to curl at the edges. The house was quiet in that unsettling way that only houses in transition can be, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for the next set of voices to fill it. I let myself in with the key I hadn't yet removed from my keychain and immediately felt the echo. Every sound I made, the soft click of the door, the creak of the hallway floorboard, bounced back at me like a whisper. I didn't expect to see anyone there. I figured they would have already left, maybe gone to stay with Donnie or one of Mom's sisters out in Pennsylvania. But as I turned the corner into the living room, I saw her. My mother. Sitting on the floor next to the cold fireplace, her knees pulled up to her chest, one hand resting on a photo frame that had been turned face down on the carpet. She didn't look up at first. Just sat there, breathing slowly, like she was trying to keep the moment from breaking. When she finally did lift her head, her eyes were red, but there weren't any fresh tears. Just exhaustion. "He's staying with Donnie now," she said, her voice hoarse, like it had been worn down from too much silence. "Said he's not coming back. Said he's done asking." I stood in the doorway for a long time, unsure of what to say. The boxes I'd come for suddenly felt like a weak excuse, like a shield I didn't need anymore. "You really hate us that much?" she asked, not accusing, not angry, just tired. Like the question had been sitting inside her for years, waiting for the right moment to slip out. I didn't answer right away. I walked over to the window, looked out at the backyard where I'd spent countless weekends mowing, planting, repairing, where I'd built the deck with my own hands and paid for the lumber on my own dime because Walter said he didn't believe in credit cards. Then I turned and looked at her, sitting there like a ghost of the woman who used to hold my hand when I had nightmares, who used to pack my lunch with little notes in the foil. A woman I still loved, in some way, even if that love had grown tired and misshapen and full of splinters. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I just finally love myself more." She nodded, like she knew it already, like part of her had been waiting to hear it for years, even if she wasn't ready for what came next. I picked up the boxes without another word, walked past the half-packed kitchen, past the empty coat hooks by the door, and stepped out into the cold air without looking back. The next time I saw the house, it was on Zillow. Listed. Staged. Unrecognizable. Strangers would walk through it soon, remarking on the layout and the square footage, debating paint colors and mortgage rates, having no idea that the walls had once echoed with the slow, unraveling heartbreak of a family that mistook silence for peace. I don't know where my parents are now. Donnie won't tell me, and I haven't asked again. Part of me wonders if they're somewhere warm, starting over in a small apartment with thrift store furniture and a TV that doesn't quite sit straight. Part of me thinks they're still angry, still confused, still asking each other how it all got away from them. Rachel texted me last week. Said she was going to be in town for a few days and asked if I wanted to get coffee. Just coffee. No pressure. No heavy talks. I haven't answered yet. I might not. I haven't decided if I'm ready to see someone who knew me when I still bent myself and have to fit into someone else's life. I've been waking up earlier lately, making real breakfast instead of grabbing gas station muffins on the way to work. I bought a plant. It's dying, but I water it anyway. That feels like enough for now. People think revenge feels good, but honestly, it just feels done. And sometimes, done is the best feeling in the damn world.